Okay. I'll start with a short story. You know, my book about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was a book called, a non-fiction book called God, A Story of Revelation. It's about the history of how human beings have thought about the mystery of their own existence. And the book starts with the story of Job in the Old Testament, and it ends with a conversation between Einstein and the Indian poet Tagore. So I won't go through the whole history of how our understanding of existence has evolved over several thousand years, but the last bit of the book is quite interesting because Einstein's view is that the universe exists as you see it, and Tagore's view is no, that's a very species-specific experience in a human brain, and that the universe is not just as you see it, that there's a deeper reality to that. So anyway, I was traveling the country talking about this book, and I was in Los Angeles, where my son picked me up with my then 5-year-old grandson, whose name is Deepak Chopra. He's a little precocious, and so as we stepped out of the airport, he looked at me and he said, Dada, which is the Indian name for grandfather. He said, "What is dark energy?" So, interesting question from a 5-year-old. And I said to him, "What do you know about dark energy?" And he said, well, it flows through the night sky, which is a very poetic description of this energy. I said, "What else do you know about it?" And he said, "It's 70% of the universe." How many of you know that, by the way? Okay, so I was pretty surprised by that. And as we stepped out of the airport and got into the car, we were driving by Santa Monica, and I pulled down the window, and he looks out the window. We can see the ocean. We can smell it, and it's a beautiful day. And he looks at me again. He says, "How did they make the ocean?" I said, "Who make the ocean?" He said, "They." I said, "No, that's not a scientific way of asking questions. You know, you can't even tell me what you mean by they." So he closes his eyes for a second. We taught him meditation at 4. So he reframes the question. He says, "How did the ocean get made?" So now, you know, instead of saying, "How did they make the ocean?" he says, "How did the ocean get made?" So I said, well, probably the same way as the Earth did. We split off a big star, and now that's the solar system, and we're part of that, and the ocean is part of that. And then I turned the question back at him, and I said, "Do you know how many planets there are in the solar system?" And he said, "Well, if you count Pluto, there are 9. But if you don't, because some people don't think Pluto is a planet, there are 8. And I said, "Where did the solar system come from?" I asked him. And he said, "From the galaxy?" I said, "Yeah, what's the name of the galaxy?" He said, "The Milky Way." I said, "That's true." "Where did the galaxy come from?" He said, "The universe." I said, "That's true." "Where did the universe come from?" And without batting an eyelid, he said, "From another dimension." So, I've been thinking about this for 35 years. And this 5-year-old kid summarizes everything in 3 minutes. So, I'm Indian. We think everything recycles. So, that's another word for reincarnation. So I'm thinking Galileo. And anyway, I said to him, "How do you know all this?" And he said, "It's on my Pokemon." So I tell you this story for several reasons. The most important one being that if you don't know what's happening on Pokemon, you're not part of the zeitgeist. And that your 5-year-olds are getting information that can't be found in journals. But it also raises a very important question. And that is, if you look at the year science, 2005, and things haven't changed since then, the two most open questions in science today, the first one is, what is the universe made of? And it's open because we don't know the answer. And the reason we don't know the answer is because of what my grandson said. 70% of the universe is this dark energy, which is expanding the distance between galaxies faster than the speed of light right now. Of the remaining 30%, 25% is dark matter. And the reason it's called dark matter is it's invisible. You can't see it. And the reason it's invisible is that it's not atomic. It's not made up of atoms. So it doesn't reflect light, absorb light, emit light, and there's no way to interact with it. Why do we call it matter? Well, it bends space-time in the same way as regular matter. So it's responsible for most of the gravity in a galaxy. It's holding together our solar system, our galaxy, and therefore, ultimately, your body. Your body would fall apart if this mysterious force or matter or invisible non-stuff wasn't there, whatever it is. That leaves only 5% of the universe, which is actually atomic. Now, here's something very astonishing. Of that 5% of the universe, the visible universe, which is atomic, 99.99999% is invisible interstellar dust that hasn't yet coalesced into stars. And most of it is hydrogen and helium anyway, but you can't see it. So the visible universe is only 0.01% of what exists out there. The rest is unknown and perhaps unknowable. How do you interact with something that is not atomic? Everything we know that exists, including our own bodies, and this room is made up of atoms. So that's 0.01% about what exists out there. And that 0.01%, which is atoms, if you look at atoms, what are they? They're particles. And what are particles? Well, our physicist friends tell us they're waves. And unlike particles, which are things which have units of mass and energy, waves are invisible. They're called possibility waves, and they span all of the universe. So what's the universe made of? Nothing. What is the stuff of the universe? We don't know. If that should not fill you with what philosophers call epistemic humility and surprise and wonder and reverence for your own existence, then your humanity is not complete. The second open question in science is, what is the biological basis of consciousness? Because we are conscious beings, and scientists define consciousness in different ways. So in the West, most scientists define consciousness as first-person experience. In the East, we consider consciousness as the ground of all existence. Leaving aside that, we actually do not have a clue as to why there's consciousness or how experience occurs, because everything that you experience, whether it's a mental experience or whether it's a perceptual experience of the world, we have no idea how it occurs. So if I ask you to imagine a sunset right now, can you do it? Imagine a sunset on the ocean. Where's that picture? Of course, I'll see a neural correlate. I'll see electrochemicals in your brain, but I have no idea where that picture is. So you think of the love you feel for your mother. Can you feel it? Where is that experience happening? Okay? We have no idea. We see a neural correlate. It's called an NCC, a neural correlate of consciousness, but we have no idea how that happens. Or if I ask you to see these yellow lines here, you see this yellow? Okay, what's coming to your eyes is photons. Photons have no dimensionality. Photons do not experience time travel. In fact, the photons that were generated at the time of the Big Bang, for them, from their reference frame, no time has passed. These photons hit your eyes. They cause electrochemical reactions in the background of your retina, send an electrical current to your brain, and voila, you see a three-dimensional world in space-time. How? We don't know. Sir Arthur Eddington, one of the greatest scientists of our time, in fact, he was one of the greatest astrophysicists who did the experiment to prove Einstein's theories of relativity. He said the best answer is that something unknown is doing we don't know what. So today, in the short time I have, that's the little guy, by the way. Okay, he's not a reincarnation of Galileo. He just likes Pokemon. And his mother is Chinese, so we call him a Chindian. And he's the master race, 2/3 of the human species right now. Okay. So these are the two questions of science. What is the universe made of? What is the biological basis of consciousness? And what I'm here to offer to you is an Eastern perspective, not necessarily a totally scientific perspective, but one that may soon get scientific credibility for reasons that I'll share with you. So the essence of the hard problem is that we do not know how mental or perceptual experience occurs, how atoms and molecules build up to a brain producing consciousness. And therefore, I'm now going to suggest to you an Eastern perspective which can be looked at scientifically as well. And this is the top-down. Instead of looking how atoms end up with a brain producing consciousness, can we think of consciousness as a non-local possibility field that, in fact, conceives, governs, constructs, and becomes everything that we call physical, including our human brain. And that includes our bodies. So I'm going to rush through these slides because there's a lot of material here to talk about. But we experience consciousness as what today some consciousness philosophers call qualia, which are sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. And these are actually properties of consciousness that are species-specific and culture-specific. And in the Eastern wisdom traditions, we say this is the ground of existence, consciousness, which then experiences itself as a subtle body, which is the mind, intellect, and ego, which then experiences itself as the physical body of energy, information, and matter, which then experiences itself as the physical world. And that brain, body, and perceptual experiences of the physical world are representations of these subtle and causal realms of our existence. And that actually, the evolution of species is the evolution of forms of consciousness. So while I, as a scientist brought up, I totally understand Darwinian evolution, this model says there's something else going on as well, that what are called random mutations may not be that random, that they may be purpose-driven, and that natural selection is through behavior and expression in consciousness, and that both mind and body are experiences in what is called cognitive and perceptual space. Mind and brain are one, but there are complementarities and expressions of a deeper, more unmanifest field of infinite possibilities, which is the ground of all creation. So that's the theory part, and I could talk on it for a week, but recently, we've been doing studies at our center during a course called The Seduction of Spirit, where we take people through several forms of meditation for over a week. And these forms of meditation include awareness of body, awareness of breath, awareness of interior space, awareness of mental space. But we also teach them self-reflection, asking themselves in deep meditation questions like, who am I? What do I want? What is the nature of existence? Is there meaning and purpose to my existence? And then we also have them meditate on what we call emotional experiences like love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And I convinced a number of researchers at Harvard, Mount Sinai, Scripps, and the Blackburn lab. Elizabeth Blackburn is the Nobel laureate who discovered the enzyme telomerase, which regulates the length of our telomeres, which are connected with how long we live. And then some scientists at Mount Sinai to look at gene expression. And I will very quickly show you our results. So these were the participating scientists, and they were measuring not only gene expression, but they were measuring telomerase, telomere length, markers for inflammation, markers for biological aging, and several other things, actually. We'll see there were hundreds of thousands of measurements being made at the level of molecular biology. And also we were doing brain EEG measurements and digital cardiac measurements. And of course, the effects on the brain and heart were immediate, within seconds. But the effects that we saw on cell biology were much more intriguing. We looked at cellular aging. We looked at the brain and nervous system expressions, but we looked at gene expression networks. And I'll go over the details right now. We had controls at the same time. And first of all, we saw a dramatic shift in emotions in the direction, because they were meditating on these emotions or experiencing in the area of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and a sense of identity, which was more universal than personal. But what we also saw was a very interesting increase in 40% in telomerase, which is the enzyme that controls telomere length, in less than 4 days, which was quite shocking. And so we sent the blood samples to friends in different institutions that I mentioned, and we looked at the entire genome, and we saw gene expression increase in the direction of what is called homeostasis or self-regulation, and away from inflammation and what we call lack of homeostasis or biological chaos, and inflammatory products like chemokine production and so on. And this was our conclusion. And these are the details of how meditation can change gene expression. Some of it very dramatic. So genes that regulate heart health in a positive direction were enriched 17-fold, and this is in 4 days. Genes that regulate homeostasis and regulation of biological activity 17 times. And genes that are directly or indirectly involved in Alzheimer's, heart disease, inflammation, many types of cancer were downregulated. And again, these are details that we can go into. So our next frontier, right now, the research we're doing is called self-directed biological transformation, which includes all the meditation techniques, but also looks at the microbiome, which is 90% of the genetic information in your body is bacteria. The microbiome that lives in your gut, in your stomach, in your skin, in your hair follicles, and how this is affected through various ancient practices, including detoxing the body with plant fiber, with certain oils, with herbs called adaptogens, using these cleansing procedures, and even massage, which alters the microbiome. This study is right now in progress, And hopefully, when I come back, I'll be able to report on how basically changing the way we eat, the way we think, the way we feel, our personal relationships, our social interactions, the quality of our sleep, and the quality of our emotions actually changes totally, completely how our biology expresses itself, including how it ages. So, summary, what we saw is a sense of shift in identity from me to we to oneness, a shift in emotions in the direction of love, compassion, joy, equanimity, and a shift in brain waves towards the delta wave region, an increase in telomerase 40%, and a complete change in gene expression and gene expression networks, because genes don't operate by themselves, but they regulate each other as networks. And now we're looking at 90% of the DNA that hasn't been looked at, which is the microbiome. In conclusion, we are suggesting a systems approach to biology, starting with consciousness as fundamental, consciousness expressing itself as both mind and biology in complementary ways, consciousness being even before mind and before brain, as the non-local possibility wheel, what my grandson called the other dimension, the infinite void from where the universe came and from where we come, but that this sentience permeates all of space and time. It's self-knowing, self-organizing, self-regulating, recursive in that it repeats itself, but it evolves because it has feedback loops, and that it expresses itself at all levels, mind and matter, organism and environment, wave and particle. It's evolutionary and it's creative. It's a paradigm that hasn't actually been looked at in this way in the West, but it is a paradigm that has been understood in the East for thousands of years, and today we have a scientific way, perhaps, of looking at it. So who are we? We are the activity of the entire universe, all that dark energy, all that dark matter, all the forces and elements of the universe, but expressed in a human brain so that the universe can know itself. We are the self-aware activity of the total universe that is getting to know itself. And that is, in Eastern traditions at least, the goal of all existence, to find out who you are and rest in the awareness that you are the universe aware of itself. There's a famous expression in the Upanishads, I am the field, and I'm also the knower of the field. Thank you very much.